Okay, so I think that you should have now it on your screen. Is it correct? Can somebody confirm to me that the presentation is on? You've got a kind of triangle with different colors.
We can see it now, Oscar.
Okay, thank you very much. So welcome to everybody. And normally this kind of session is a more lively session in the sense that I like to have an exchange with you participants to this Emea Academy. It's definitely a special session, and as Mike Spencer told you in the beginning, that's also for us a kind of first try in that sense. And I hope that you will appreciate actually the next hour that we will spend together. I have to say that it's difficult to put up a presentation that fits everybody experience level, interest level, and nevertheless, I try to put different aspects that are for me important. And in that sense, let's just go through a kind of agenda or kind of topic that I would like to discuss with you in the coming hour and a half. First, I would like to introduce you Emea, because some of you knew Emea, some may not, and I think it's important because it's the body that gives us the possibility to be in contact today. Then I will move on in defining what is engineering insurance, how engineering insurance has been changing over the time, and it's still a kind of dynamic field, having changes, having a new aspect to it, and I think again here it's important to share it with you. Then I will move more to kind of world trends and different aspects of the insurance industry. Some are outside the engineering topic, but are important for the engineering line of business. Then I will specify a bit more into the Emea Global Index, which is an important part of what Emea is doing also as serving the whole industry. And then from there, I will move more to kind of soft aspects of the engineering insurance underwriting. So don't expect me to talk too much about gas turbine or about bridges, foundations. That's not the topic of today. And that's important for you to know it from the beginning, because if you expect me just to present how we are going to price and gas turbine, that's definitely not the right session. Today's session is really more a kind of 360 degrees, covering multi aspects and not only technical ones. And then finally, I would like to end over on kind of those aspects that are beside the technical ones, but are extremely important also for you as kind of underwriters getting into this world, or as I mentioned before, some of you already with a certain experience, but what are the areas that you may need to look at or develop to actually perform in a profitable way for this challenging business in which we are. So that's the program for the next hour. You can engage yourself and participate. Of course, the situation that we are facing is extremely challenging on how we can collect the questions, but the colleagues, being Mike, being Guido, Benz, and being Sonia, which can take up your questions, you can have different ways. You can post your question into the webinar system, or you can raise your hand. There is a button somewhere. You can raise your hand, and they will perceive that there is a question that needs to be asked. So please feel free to get into the organization and post your questions, because I think it's important for me also to create a kind of dialogue. And as I'm talking now, sometimes I will just make a small break and ask Mike if everything has been received correctly till now, so connections are good.
So far, Oscar, I can hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So I move to the next one after this introduction. That's basically an overview of what Emea is. And I know that you are all based in Asia, if the information I collected is right, and that's give you a kind of general overview of where Emea, oh, I have to move a few things, sorry, here. So let's give you a kind of overview of the number of registered delegates per country. And you see an important point of Emea is that the unique association, which is definitely international. And you can see here, we're covering most of the regions, most of the continents. And important is that we are increasing these footprints. Obviously, Asia, it's a very important region. I mean, that's clear for you. But I want to tell you also that for Emea and being based in Europe, it's obvious that the markets development in Asia are extremely important, and that's why this session is also or should have been conducted physically in Singapore in order to raise the interest in building bridges. But you see, there are also many other regions from South America to North America represented, and this is a fundamental element of Emea as an organization, that we are really looking for this footprint. And since good decade or 10 years, we really expand the footprint and involve more and more regions which are outside, let's say, the whole continental Europe. Another point which is important to mention is that Emea is a composite organization which do have insurers company, reinsurers, but also loss adjusters, consulting, brokers. And that's extremely important because we want to ensure a kind of entire value chain and not only looking at one perspective in one silo, but just really considered all the different elements of the chain that needs to be looked at in our industry. So you see, it's an international footprint combined with a certain number of different segments of our industry. I move on some of the definitions that we give to ourselves, and that are kind of the fundament of Emea. Emea as a kind of motto being the forum for understanding and promoting best practice in the field of engineering insurance. So that's important to understand because our scope is quite broad and it has been defined many years ago, and the important element is that it's still valid today. So sometimes when you define very strong values, they don't need to be changed over the course of time, even if the world around is changing, and that's going to be most of the topics that I would like to exchange with you today. But having strong values in the middle make that you can keep those values and just develop around. So on the left side of the slide, you got what is called the kind of solid foundation of Emea, which is an enormous knowledge and expertise. Most of the delegates that are joining Emea, and you are joining in your way today introduction to this academy, you have a huge knowledge and very strong expertise. I mentioned before the geographical diversification. Another element which is also important is tradition in this association. And well, two of the other points I mentioned it before, the value chain. Also important is to have a solid financial structure. That's important to be insured in the time acts, and creating a kind of session as today do involve a lot of people in the back, from the setting up this wonderful system that allow you to listen to me and see the presentation, to the people that put into place the structure and the organization. So that's basically some key element of Emea Foundation. How is the Emea, construct? If we put this into a kind of house, and I think it's important for you because I'm not sure that all of you know really Emea as from inside. So this is a kind of very quick overview that gives in these three major pillars how the house of Emea has been constructed. You know, Mike Spencer mentioned it. I'm a boring civil engineer, so I try just to put the kind of simplification that is close to a house. So one of the first pillar is what I can call risk management and governance. Then there is an important one which is around network and platform, and the last one is about knowledge. So starting first, we've got, and it's important to mention, a strong antitrust rule. It's important that an association like this one can discuss about topics about the market, about the industry, but should never be involved in any kind of decision that can be kind of or can be considered by some legislations as being against or representing a kind of trust association. An important other element is how we have structured the executive committee and the secretariat to give actually the body, and we've got a strong constitution. Now I move to most important is the aspect regarding the network and the platform. There is a very strong network around the annual conference, which is where the people gather together. Unfortunately, this year it was not possible to be physically together, but there was a conference that has been conducted very successfully, I have to say, and where a lot of people from around the world could actually get presentations updated from technical topics to internal topics. Participation in the working group paper, that's a very strong opportunity for you, and I can only ask you or encourage you to engage yourself in those working group papers. It's so fascinating when you work with an international group of experts, having people from different companies, having people from different horizons, working together on one specific topic. Once this topic is worked on, is presented at the annual conference. So that again here you got visibility, you got the opportunity to work most of the time on your extra hours. I don't want to hide this, but it's an opportunity for you to develop as an underwriter, to develop in your network, to develop in your expertise. And then there is another another element of the central pillar about network, which is the Emea web and the new sheets where information is shared. All these working group papers, being technical paper, really talking about these gas turbines that I'm not going to mention today, talking about the bridges that I'm not going to talk about today. Those topics are technical topics in the Emea web page, and you can find it. It's important that they are open source. Those documents are offered by all the members to the community, and that's open. You can access to them. Even if you are not yet member of Emea, what I hope you will all become sooner or later. And then we got on the knowledge also a certain number of points, and the Emea Academy is one of those. That's normally a 1 week, as you know, seminar. And as Mike Spencer, secretary I mentioned before, I hope that in the future, when all this will actually be in a more positive situation, that will be a physically possibility to conduct all the technical sessions. Statistics and country report, also an important element of the knowledge, which is exchange of data, and you will get some pieces of it later on. And finally, the working group paper that I mentioned before. Okay, you are all online, Mike?
Oscar, I'm online. Thank you very much for that extensive review of Emea, and I hope everyone's convinced that it's a great organization, and we look forward to the rest.
Okay, so I move to the rest.
If you just butt in, if you have any questions, we didn't mention this at the start, you can use the chat box on the side of your, if everyone's found the chat box, send any questions you have to Oscar and I will relay them to him, but you can write them down all in the chat box, which you can access by clicking onto the little red arrow on the top right hand of your screen. Okay?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
The attendees will see a questions tab as well. It's better if they use the questions tab,
Okay.
but we will pick up their questions regardless.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks for that, Stephanie.
Okay, as I said, I'm going to talk about some general issues, and one of those is quite basic, but I think is still important to put in this perspective of today. So insurance need basically three types of resources to conduct good business. The first is capital. Capital is required, and I have to say that in general terms, the insurance industry, if I look at the entire world and over the last 10 years, the management of the capital is very well done by the insurance company, is very stable, is constant, is not something that should afraid us. It's controlled. There are all the rating agencies looking at it very strongly and in detail, so it's well managed. The second element, which is extremely important to conduct insurance, is around the human resources. Is again here very basic. You need to have educated people, you need to have experienced underwriter, you need to have actuaries, you need to have a bunch of people, and again here the industry is tapping in a good source of human capital. So that's a second pillar which is quite well operating. And the third one that is absolutely required for insurance is data analytics. That's basic. I mean, from all kind of insurance, you need to have data to calculate your premium, to calculate your loss ratio, to calculate your underwriting your results. And that's where, to tell the truth, I put it in a very black and white, and allow me to be very provocative. On the data analytic, I do consider that our industry is a complete disaster. And I said it because what is required is to have actually a way to aggregate the data. And unfortunately, there is lack of coherence in the data, in the system. There is a lot of companies having outdated IT systems, or they have a lot of different segmented IT systems that sometimes are not integrated. They can have also legacy from the past, where part of the data is in a whole system and you cannot access to it because it has been freezed. And you see, there is a lot of good reasons, but if I put these three major elements required to conduct insurance, I have to say that on two, we are extremely good on as an industry, and on the third one, we're still very, very bad. And let's compare it to other industries or to other type of business. Look at what I call artificial intelligence and driving algorithm. I don't know if you can see it. Normally it should be moving, but if we considered the kind of automatic driving, it's possible nowadays to have, with the computing turning angles, with radar image that the car can put into his IT system. You got a way to analyze traffic signals with cameras. You got a way to predict trajectories of the different vehicles moving around you. So basically, that's totalized something like 8,000 millions of factors per second that are analyzed in a kind of artificial intelligence driving algorithm. So you see a huge amount of data which is absorbed, which is digest, and that make up decision. If I look now on the other scale, what are we doing as an insurance underwriter? Well, you see, you got total contract value, you got duration of the project, you got type of risk, the subsegments, a certain number of techniques deployed, you got insurance elements of the coverage, BI, DSU, TPL. So basically you got something between 50 to 100 factors, and let's say in general, you get kind of 10 hours to analyze these. So you see the huge gap that exists in what the future, which is already here, can already deliver in data analytic and what we do in our manual work. So don't get me wrong. I don't say that we have to replace underwriters by artificial intelligence. We are far away from this situation. But between these two worlds, there is a huge gap to be closed. And this gap needs to be closed with the bridge of the data that we need to be better on. Let's move more and see that, as I said, digitalization is not coming, is already here. And maybe here we have to split a bit on the lower axis. You've got the time as a factor, and on the other one you got the complexity. So if you put this onto a line, you will have a kind of evolution where in retail and personal lines, probably already now in this full digitalization, and that's coming quick, and it's extremely close around the corner that you can move. And you can move it because on the complexity, you don't have so many factors. And if you move around the line, you got more to come on the commercial lines, but later on. And so going on, the same happened to industrial lines. That's more difficult to digitalize, and then specialties. And somehow you got engineering in the middle. And if you continue to move, at the very end, you got the Emea working group paper. This is something that you cannot digitalize. You need to have people thinking, you need to have people putting their brain into connection so that you can really create an interesting Emea working group paper. So don't worry, there's still work in the future. Even in 10 years, even in 20 years, people will be writing papers. Okay, I don't think that I have questions, so I keep moving. Oh, sorry. Okay, now I try to move on another aspect, which is again much more general, and we are facing a situation which is quite particular. We got on one side a huge amount of CatNat events that are more important in frequency and more important in intensity. So we are really facing now a situation where our business, which was in the past maybe not so affected by CatNat, it was more driven by, I would say, technical kind of losses. If we look at the portfolio, general portfolio, engineering, technical lines are more and more affected by this part of the business. There are some reasons for it. One of those is basically the density and the evolution of the population worldwide. You see that, or you can see, and in Asia, it's really the case. You got a huge concentration in the cities, and the cities are very often close to water points because men still need water. And because we need water for a lot of things, we tend to go and the cities close to the shore are developing more, so concentration of values. In those cities and big cities are more and more affected by those kind of events. You got hurricanes, typhoons. You got in Asia quite a lot of typhoons this year from Bangladesh, India, Japan. We got the wildfires, something that was not really something worrying us in the past, and more now we got them from Australia to California. With a huge impact. Again here, in the past, wildfires were in the nature, and now they are more and more getting close to the inhabited region where assets are. Moving to another point is there are more and more construction losses and even mega losses. I have a slide on this, which is related to a new initiative that Emea is conducting, and we will show some concrete examples. Okay, it would be impossible to talk today and have this kind of introduction without mentioning COVID. I think it's really something that impacts the whole world, impacts everyone. It impacts you, it impacts me in the way we are doing now this exercise. And you see that COVID will be a game changer in the world. It will be a game changer in our industry, being insurance or being a traveling industry. The COVID is also affecting engineering as a line of business and from different perspectives. first in the way we're working, as I mentioned, but also in our numbers in the business. It could be that it's not affecting it as by day one, but it will affect it because engineering insurance needs to have growth in the economy, in the world economy, and that's why without having this growth, we cannot insure projects. Another impact could be on the old BI side. Companies are more on a stress situation. This stress situation created that they reduce production because the economy is on slowdown, and that's create another pressure on the insurance company, reduce the BI. They got less cash, so they may want to reduce their cost of insurance, and therefore they may have to bear a higher share of the risk, for example, by having higher deductible. If you want to pay less insurance, you can pay less insurance, but you have to increase your deductible. So if you combine those elements, that can change the way how we conduct. Reduce premium, increase that deductible so that the client reduces cash out, but nevertheless, for the party in the insurance industry, we can still manage our long-term profitability. Another element what I would like to say it's important and is not deploying its effect today, but you as entering in this segment of industry, you have to keep this in the back of your mind, and it's an important one, is the impact that stress financial situation on a client can deploy on the next 3 to 5 years. I give an example. If a company start to have economical difficulties, they will reduce investments in the new machines. They will reduce investments in maintenance. They will reduce investment in security. They may reduce investment even on the education of their employees, because these are not immediate impacting decisions. So by reducing the level of maintenance, by reducing the investments, you create actually an increased risk over the portfolio. Let's take 10,000 companies, and on 50% of these 10,000 companies, you apply those factors of reducing investment, automatically the outcome would be an increase in the loss ratio. So you see, my point is COVID-19 may not have a direct impact today on your portfolio, today on your premium, but it will have an impact on the midterm.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course, please.
Have you noticed whether COVID has had an impact on losses, increasing the delays and therefore increasing BI DSU losses because of the more difficulty of getting people to site, et cetera, with the COVID travel restrictions, etc.?
That's correct, Mike. Thank you for asking. There are already some claims impacting actually our industry, and you mentioned a few of those reasons, and some do have a real case. I know, or we are exchanging a few where, for example, the power company has been with a purely technical normal losses where turbine has his parts that has been detached and through the whole turbine, so the kind of salad of turbine. And all the experts from these very famous company could not travel to verify, dismantle, and analyze the root cause. So actually the BI has been extended not for technical reasons, but just for COVID reasons. And now there is a debate. How can we assess actually this part of the loss? Was this part of the loss of the contribution of the COVID is covered by the policy wording? Yes or no? So this is the first kind of area where there are uncertainties. Other uncertainties are regarding the BI, and you know that in the UK, in the US, bit less in Asia, and I would say that Asia and Europe tend to be rather okay in the sense that the wording is not challenged as hard as it is mainly in the US. And yes, in the US there are a lot of discussions around this. There is in California a special judgment which is expected to be given next year as in the first quarter, that can impact retroactively on declaring a lot of BI losses just because they are not producing as being covered by the policy. Did I answer the question, Mike?
That very helpful. Thank you, Oscar.
Okay, thank you. And please engage again our participants. I think there are 16 that they can engage questions. Okay, and now trends in energy and infrastructure. I think I've got some other slides going to define this later on. So let's move a bit for the sake of the timetable. Okay. Another point which is very important to mention here in terms of general trends is cyber, and cyber as, I would say, being very high in the agenda of business risks in the past. You see, this was the case in 19. Of course, for year 2020, the main risk and the main worry for most of our insured worldwide is everything related to COVID. But if we now make parentheses and we look on kind of general terms, you got business interruption being the major worry, and that's probably also the case this year because it's also combined to COVID, as we mentioned before. Then there is the market development and intensified competition, the economy being in stagnation for 19 is clearly in a stress situation for 2020. And then third, you got the cyber incident. And believe me, we're now moving into an area which is new field for the entire insurance world, but engineering can play a massive role in understanding this because cyber is very close to electronic equipment. Electronic equipment is a business that was developed in the 70s, 80s in the line of business engineering because that was technical, because computer was a new machine, because it's a machine, and then it was close to engineering. And that's an important development field. Now, on this, I would simply quote what the Emea paper, and I engage you to read the Emea paper on cyber, which is based on a very easy key rule, which is the help. We put it like this, or it has been put like this to give a kind of flavor. Cyber first needs to be excluded from the typical property or engineering insurance. If it's not excluded, it can be considered as a silent risk. And you are, or we are, in a ticking bomb if we don't exclude this from a coverage that do not have the wording and the endorsement to cope with this risk. Because it's a new risk and it's getting into this policy through the back door, we have to be extremely attentive. And the help rule should help you to consider what are the 3 steps required. First, it needs to be exclude, and then it needs to be separate into specific terms and conditions with limits, with specific wording, and finally also with a price. So that's the help with the ELP. Follow this rule as the Emea paper said, and you are on the safe side. If not, you will start to have cyber exposure in your portfolio in engineering without having the right wording for it, without having the right price for this risk. And then fourth, the natural catastrophe, I mentioned it before, still developing and growing. So that's for cyber risk. It's moving, it's just one slide. And in the Emea Academy, there is a 5 session on this. And I think it's important for me to mention this in this introduction, but you will have much more the information and rules once you assist to the full session on cyber. Okay. Evolution of technology, and that's another line that shows that since the very beginning, engineering insurance has been, you see, following the development from the steam engines in the late 16th century, with introduction of the electric motor later at 1834. You got the first air conditioning system, you got metal injection process. You see, all this kind of evolution and getting into scanner and internet, engineering has always been there, and you can recognize some of the insurance that we're still giving today with machinery breakdown, with electronic equipment, I mentioned it before, with construction, a lot of insurance that has followed this evolution of the technology. Now, what is engineering as a line of business? And I have to go back to the 14th after the, or just at the word, the Second World War, even if it started before, but again here, the first coverage that been created was around machinery breakdown, around the steam boilers, around these heavy equipment that were in operation and that suddenly require insurance. If we look today, if we look yesterday, then it become machinery breakdown, it become electronic equipment, it become construction all risks. So it starts to develop following this technical spectrum that you got on the other slide. Today, we still have those of yesterday, but you've got new ones. And that's important to see that we see now more and more industrial all risk, power, cyber, as I mentioned before. So the question will be, what's going to be tomorrow? What is around the corner? What can we see that will be the engineering line of business? And then you integrate those from today and you put new ones and you see, okay, here you can have oil and gas, you can have submarine cables, you can have the Internet of Things, you can have technical guarantees, things that sometimes are already around or do exist, but they can integrate very quickly the landscape of engineering as a line of business. So if I put it in a different way, and here I put some factors that defining line of business, starting with these, again, dual axes, quite simple. And on one axe, you got the complexity and the technicity. And on the other, you got one of the major driver of insurance, which is the law of big data. I call it the law of big data because it's a nice way to structure things along this line. And here, to make it correctly on a mathematical, for those that are interested, I put it's one on law of the big law number, because space, for example, it's a business which is very complex and very technical, and because there is very little data there, it's on the high end of the law of big data. And in the center, I put industrial property, because property kind of mother of the engineering line of business. It's there, and it's more important, definitely, but is essential. So how do we articulate all the product around this? You got the retail business, the personal lines, which are more simple in the complexity and do have a lot of data. You got billion of people, you got a lot of cars, you got much more data on this kind of business. So if you move, you can have commercial lines that just go around this corner. You got energy business, which is more complex and has less data. Cyber is moving here, construction, power, electronic equipment. So you see, I put these like this, and then you got kind of conceptually, you got non-life and poor property, which will cover this area that you see now in the blue zone. And you got on the other kind of technical lines, which more and more this one. Both do have an overlapping, and you should know this in your companies. I think that it's more and more important that we break the rules and start to think conceptually. That's why these slides. A bit less in terms of what is our as industry structure, because that's the way our insurance are looking at it. But let's see if we put this into customer centricity. If you are a power company, to tell the truth, you are a risk manager of a power company, and excuse my French, but it's not so, or you don't give a shit, sorry, if it's property, engineering, power. What you want to have is competent people. You want to have people that understand your business. You want to have people that can figure out how you operate your company. And this is what is important. So we have to think more in terms of what is the client need and not what is our old structure from the insurance point of view, and rather put the client in the center. Underwriting approach, treaties, all these are considerations that are important, and how you combine them, it's very important on the result on how you balance your portfolio. So this is for each company slightly different, but it's also important because you see engineering is a kind of mixed animal. It's not a single defined structure. It can have very different borders and different limitations. Okay, Emea today, and you remember that was the base, but what is the aspiration? And one of the very strong aspirations that Emea has is to improve quality and data figures. And I have to say that the last year, a huge jump has been made by Emea, and I engage you to go on the website and see the presentation on data, which is really an improvement towards the past, with a lot of new criteria, not new data that will allow you to better perform your daily business. Some of the others aspirations and the continuation of this footprint is important, so that's why I would or we would like to have you joining Emea, or your companies, or you as a member participating in different forums, not only in the academy but also in working group papers or at virtual conferences. Sorry that I take here an important element that's just from the past, but that was just a statement done in 18 about the market. And well, I allow myself to declare at this time in the end of 18 that the market was unsustainable, and that was a real need that will conduct lead players, lead markets to abandon the engineering segment, and unfortunately laying off underwriters. That was a very black and white statement that's made back in 18, but unfortunately it has proven to be quite crude, and a lot of companies has moved out of this segment, mainly because of poor results, mainly because of the soft market, and mainly because of the fact that the impact of previous underwriting years has been underestimated. Again, here Emea did a great job in looking at the results not on annual basis but on underwriting year, as you probably know in your company, which is a key criteria to steer the business. So yes, a lot of companies has been exiting the market, and probably heard about syndicates out of London, large groups, also here in Switzerland, reinsurance companies, retrieving capacity, announcement made by big ones, starting with A and finishing with Z from the alphabet. Large companies that did re-underwriting, and that's create a market change that I will describe later on. Market index survey, that's what Emea created, and that's an index that has made its way into different documents, even document from the industry, Sigma from Swiss Re, in the press. So I think that measuring the rate change is an important way to actually steer the business and steer the portfolio, and that's where Emea is also contributing worldwide to this effort to get better data. In this sense, I take just one or two slides out of this presentation made at the annual conference this year. Still no question?
I haven't got any questions yet, Oscar. I think everyone's listening with lots of attention. Yeah.
Okay, but again, if there are questions, just raise your hand or put it into the system. So what is the global engineering market premium? That was the very first question to answer, because on one side here, I hope you can see my mouse moving, we've got data which has been collected over decades by Emea and shows a reduction. These numbers drive our attention because we were convinced that in reality there is no reduction, but just the number that we collect were insufficient. So Emea launched new initiatives, and one of them you can see here was to estimate what is the premium that what we see as engineering can be collected worldwide. And estimations come to a number between 20 to 30 billion, so a very large number, but also a very large number in his spread. So that's confirmed that Emea and engineering is not a very strongly, equally defined line of business worldwide. And now if we put this into perspective of the number that Emea collect from statistic from 20 country association, we see that is roughly 1/3 of it. So we perceive that we cannot capture all the data just by getting those country numbers. So that's why we start now to put other numbers. And for you to move and to consider this number around 30 billion is a good indicator of the size of the markets that you can consider. And again, here, depending how much different business lines you put onto it. Then the Emea created another very pertinent index called the loss ratio, which look rather at the evolution of the loss ratios over the year. That's another key element to steer the portfolio, and it's new, and it's giving better attention to not only the rate change but the loss ratio, because we know that the loss ratio on underwriting year that we're suffering today in many cases come from year, 2 year, or even 3 or 4 years before. So a new very valid index. Then you got the rate change that I mentioned before, and I will show it later on. With a certain number of companies contributing, 14 is not sufficient. You need to have more companies worldwide, because only if collecting this data we can actually increase the transparency of the market. All this is absolutely legal, and it has been checked and rechecked by a lot of compliance officers from very large, important reinsurers and insurance companies. And then another new index, which is the major loss index, is also an important way to feel what are the losses worldwide above 50 million for 100% that is affecting our industry. So you see a lot of things. This data is collected on an anonymously form. That's absolutely crucial. It has been cross-checked, so you can engage your companies. You are not at risk. All the compliance, all the international regulators has checked, and as long as we take the rate change and not the absolute rates, we are absolutely allowed to make those analyses. So here again, I engage you to contribute, to engage your company to contribute to this, because the more the data we've got, the better is the view. We structured it into project and operational risk. We define a basket of simple objects, and we put this into a kind of defined structure, and you have just to give your indication, your perspective how an infrastructure building with certain value has a rate change over the year. The same applied to an infrastructure project, a road. The same applied to an erection risk of a power plant. We define it, I think, about 200 megawatts. And those criteria allow that you compare always the same object over the time so that you can measure this rate change. And we do the same for operational, and we structure those in 3 categories: oil and gas, power, and heavy industries. So you ask yourself now, what is the rate change and what did Emea measure worldwide? And you got here the result of this consolidated data, and that's extremely important that you read this correctly. First, the different colors bring you the different type of object that we measure. The second element, which is important, is that we said in an arbitration way that 2010 will be a kind of creation point where index is measured at 100%. Before, these are estimation. This data is estimation, and since here we started to measure it really. And you see, this is extremely important what happened since 18, and you may remember the statement I made that the market needs to change because that was going against the wall, did happen, and really in a short period of time, we got this important correction of the market that you can see here, where all the segments shows increase in the rates. Project and operational risk, business rate increase, and that's for the second year in a row. Now, very important, if we are here now, what happened in the future? And that's my conviction, my perspective is that the projection for the next years in terms of interest rates will remain very low. And this is a very strong factor to pursue and continue the hardening of the terms and conditions. I will describe this point later on with 2 other slides. So you see here the market has changed and changed radically, and it's not finished. Now, this is a global view. You are in Asia, and you may ask, well, what's the situation in Asia? So here I put other factors first, and then we will move to the regions. Here, first you show Emea. Fine, Emea is saying something, but is it only Emea view, or what is the view from others? And I take here as a source Emea Construction and Engineering Market Review in May, and you can see the curves is slightly presented in a different form because, well, it's a broker. Sometimes they have to communicate in a way, but you can see the same impact. And you see all these 3 segments show a clear rate increase. These are extract from the report. You see that many regions, many, meaning not all, are now experiencing rate increase between 25 and 50%, depending on the occupancy and cat exposure. So huge, massive rate increase, but for many regions, not all. You can see also Middle East is still very soft market, and well, it's changing also slowly. Recently, a very large corporate company decided to close offices in Dubai. There is a lot of capacity exiting the market in Middle East. So I do see a change, and probably that Middle East will be also changing. But you see, that's an overview. And now you got on the other side another source, Gallagher, to put it transparent. You see UK civil engineering rate increase plus 30 to 40%. Power, oil, gas, very strong increase between 25-30. US domestic market, bit slow, rate increase 15%. Overall construction 25 to 30. So a huge change in the market. Now I put it with another perspective, now coming from March GOT. And I put here a rate which is measured quarter by quarter. So you have to add those rate increase. And I compare here US property. I don't have numbers for engineering because engineering is in international terms not such a large, and very often is included when talking about rates change, talking about major drivers. It's included in property. So that's why I thought it was important to share with you the index of property, even if it's not exactly the same as in engineering, but it can be used as a good proxy to analyze the rate change. So you see US property, and you see it started to change actually much earlier, already in 17. The first change was in the last quarter in 17, after a few catnat. It was still moderated, and over 80, that was like just changing from slightly minus to slightly plus. But you see, end of 18, beginning of 19, that's when the big change happened, and it moved around rate increase from 4 to 10, 10 to 13, 13, 18, 18, 21. So a really sharp curve. The same happened, you can read it, basically the same happened in LATAM. It was below, it's remained at 0, and then the peak started again here in 19. Now moving closer to the regions that are interesting for you, a few words into Europe. You see same pattern with a slightly different curve, but the same pattern, and maybe less sharp as I showed before in US, because catnat is not so strong in Europe. And now I move to your region, and that's important. Your region, Asia, the market is also changing. It's changing with two differences in the parameters. The change start later on. You see that it started actually to change basically in the second quarter of 19. And the second change in the change is that the rate is lower. You remember that before I was talking of a rate increase around 15, 20%, and in Asia is still moderate with the 10%, around 10%. So it's coming later on, but it's coming, and it's coming with less intensity, but you probably will get the wave a bit later on. So you see, that's general views how the market is changing worldwide. I said it before, the market is changing based on a certain number of very, very big losses in engineering. And here, that's again a very good compiled data that Emea is working on to increase again the data. You remember, data is important in the resource that we need for insurance, because we realize this. Emea launched a lot of new initiatives to create new indexes. Rate change is one, loss ratios on underwriting year is another one, and big losses is another one. So you see here, we start to consolidate all these huge events. From there, I don't see any particular one being in Asia. Yes, Macau is definitely this big fire, 150 million. In Asia, we got Auckland, which could be Australia is, South Pacific is very often attached to Asia. But you see a certain number of big losses, and Impex is a large LNG plant in erection. Ituango, the most famous one in South America. Fires, catnat events, some are technical ones, like the Diwo in the power plant in Morocco with 250 million, but we still have an issue, which is fire, and catnat has been the major driver of these big losses. I move now to a different aspect that you have to understand. That's again, it's not an gas turbines from Siemens or whatsoever. That's how the financial performance of insurance industry is composed. I take that on 10 years average, so a kind of long period, the profit of an insurance company is generated one side by the technical underwriting and another side by the investment income. And it's extremely important that we as a engineering underwriter understand this peculiarity. So basically, let's take it 50-50. So 50 from the result of your terms and conditions. I make a question. Mike, are you all following? Are you online? You get my voice and slides?
I'm still online, Oscar. I still got all the attendees are still online. Yeah.
Okay.
How much longer have you got, Oscar? You've gone over your hour. Yeah.
I still have 20 minutes. I think it's in 20 minutes I have to be finished, right? Is it right?
All right. An hour and a half then, yeah.
Excuse
Okay.
me, Oscar.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. It won't cut you off. Even if you go over, you won't be cut off.
Well, it depends on the interest. So my plan is
Yeah.
to finish at 25, so in 10, 20 minutes. And
Okay.
if there are questions, fine. If not, we close. If there are interests, we can extend a little bit. So important
Okay.
to understand this 50-50 kind of relation. So on one side, we got the investment income, which are generated by the assets. So the premium we collect is not immediately spent into claims. And this is one of the basic of insurance. In order to generate investment income, you need to have interest rates. That's the second multiplying factor. And finally, you need also to have duration, because as we know, when we do our private investment, if we invest for 1 year or 5 years or 10 years, that's a kind of different ballgame. So engineering is an interesting line of business because it's got partially a portfolio which is annual, partially a portfolio which is multi-annual. And if you combine these together, you can use the money between 3 to 5 years, depending on the structure of your portfolio. And if it's a purely construction portfolio and you are in the very large segment, like some companies or colleagues do have, then the maturity is even 10 years. So it's tricky, but you need to multiply the volume of your premium by the interest rate and the duration, and that's the time you can get to make your money, giving you investment income. Now, I would say that's fine, and you see, this is the past, but what would be the financial performance outlook in the future? And that's an important point of today's world. And you see, a big warning sign will come here. And why I put a very strong warning signal is because if we look ahead and we look what is the future out of these 3 parameters that you need, assets, interest rate, and duration, there is one that will be close to 0 in the next 3 to 5 years, is the interest rate. So you can have as much asset as you want, you can have as long period of maturity of your portfolio, but as long, and we all have some maths in our back, as long as you multiply any number by 0, you still have 0. And if I look what last Wednesday the Federal Reserves said, is that the interest rates will stay at a very low level, and we don't see the Fed increasing rates for at least another 5 years. So wow, that means that we won't have interest rates at high levels. So assets multiplied by 0, multiplied by duration, no technical, no financial return. So in other words, we need to generate the profit from the technical underwriting. And that's another huge game change regarding to the last decades, where the rates were not very high, but they were still giving a bit of margin. Now it will be 0. COVID will even keep these interest rates at a very low level. So you see, we've got now a situation which is very delicate, because all underwriters need to be conscious that the result of the company is purely generated by the technical underwriting. This is probably the most crucial point that you have to get into this today presentation. So now I move, and I want to give some 3 general trends in engineering. First is what I can call verticalization of the market. So it means that you got insurance and reinsurers, and in the past that was quite clear. The role was rather one doing direct business and the other one doing reinsurance. Now we got a kind of mix. Both sides are growing, and first, the insurer are increasingly writing reinsurance business, and from the other side, you got reinsurance that increasingly is writing direct business. So here, that's something that's keep moving, and is a trend that changed the market. Another one which is changing is this convergence between engineering and operational technical risk. In the past, I would say that the traditional product split was property equal fire, engineering equal machinery breakdown. Now it's more like, well, what's the size, what the industry segment? So you got rather a purely fire business and industry, which is getting closer and closer to engineering. And why is this split? So now I just change to another, and I present here again a slide showing what is a construction all risk. And you will have this when you will discuss with the colleagues of sessions dealing exactly with the construction. Construction covered fire and collapse. So if you got a purely CAR construction all risk insurance, you have this coverage. You got also flood, which is covered. You got also earthquake, which is covered in a construction all risk policy. You got wind, and you got testing and commissioning for operations. So you see, the coverage is given for those external perils. So now look at what is the coverage that you can grant into an operational industrial all risk. You got fire and collapse, right? An operational industrial all risk also cover flood, also cover earthquake, and you are all brilliant people, so you see what I want to say. Wind is also covered, and operation which is covered, which is very basically the same coverage as we've got in testing, with the differences that here it's less from an unknown because you've got already the testing which is behind you. So you got the same coverage, same asset, same client, same peril, same MPL. So you've got what I call continuity of coverage. So that's, again, looking at the trends that I mentioned before, why there is a certain analogy in putting those line of business closer and closer together. Now, the third one in the major trends, so verticalization, then convergence, and the third one is role of the broker. The broker is really changing in the last decades, and it's changing from different points. First, you got a convergence of reinsurance and direct broker. You got a huge amount of merger going on. I mean, it's obvious that the concentration now is creating two very large blocks and then a multitude of smaller ones, and that's changing. And then you got also kind of decentralization going on. London remain in absolute values the world hub, but Miami, Singapore, Zurich, Sydney, Houston, New York are also getting more and more important. Brussels through the Brexit. So you got a change here. Centralization going on and concentration of the brokers. So major trends. If I go now to the technical, what I perceive is this triangle of size, complexity, and faster cycle. Faster cycles are important if we consider that in the past. Sorry, gentlemen or ladies, I have to take a breath. In the past, you would have models of technology that will last for 10 years. But those cycles are getting faster because you need to improve the efficiency. So when a model of a gas turbine was stabilized and was given in a form, nowadays, everyone, every year, is giving a new change, a new device, a new version, which is a small prototype. So you got a kind of combination of prototype being constantly developed is what I call the faster cycles, making that you cannot compare the data of the past. Then you got the size of the project that are getting bigger, bigger, bigger. I mean, it's amazing that now you got projects of billions on construction, in investment, where in the past those size were not hitting these billion numbers as often as it is today. And then you got the complexity with subcontractors, with digital planification. That whole is creating these three-dimension development in the technology of the business we are looking at. I cannot talk today about general trends without mentioning environmental, social, and governance. three key pillars that are changing the way we are looking at risk. That's the called corporate responsibility. And first, on environment, that's a huge change as the climate change that is moving in our industry, the impact of the CO2 created the need for a new approach in how we look at our business. In the past, 30 years ago, I can say when I started, I don't know, when do you start, but when I started, to tell the truth, those were consideration not looking at, not taking into consideration at all. Nowadays, they are becoming more and more important. Same on the social aspect, on the human trafficking, on the labor rights, on impact on local population, reputational issues. So we need to develop a certain sense. We need to develop criteria to analyze this. And of course, governance, more and more an issue. I mean, talking about compliance, sanctions, bribery, financial system instability, or even a legal system instability. All these elements now are in need to be part of your underwriting approach. If you don't, then you will be affected by a very reputational issue. It's still rather soft, but the first signals appear in engineering, and I can give you a few examples of pipelines, big pipelines, constructions across the whole country. I keep it, so to say, anonym, but there was a famous case for a very large insurance company being put into the media with a very strong bad reputational link to their engagement in the construction of a very large pipeline. The question here is not, is it right or is it wrong? Anyone could have a good judgment. Anyone could have a good reason why it makes sense or why not. But the point is not there. The point is why this is hitting the headline and how this can affect your reputation. So you getting into the underwriting, I can only tell you and encourage you to have a look at ESG, because it's part of the overall evaluation of a risk. I move a bit on the renewable. I said it's important, and here you got kind of combination of various aspects. On the left side, on the top, you got the evolution of the renewable energy, and you see that the fossil fuels in Europe, this is the conglomerate of Europe. I don't have the numbers for Asia. Sorry, I was searching, but lacking a bit of time. But this is Europe, and you see the trend. It's clearly with a reduction of fossil fuels and coal, even with the stronger reduction. And that's still the case in Asia, particularly two countries, India and China, are still using quite a lot of coal. But of course, also there is a huge change, and you see with the wind and solar energy, which is developing at a fast track. And on the lower side, you got the share of total generation worldwide, and you see kind of similar picture with a kind of a natural gas going up, but that come close to the top. You got the coal, which is constantly reducing in the last 10 years, nuclear, which is stable, but then you got on the green, nice that the color has been chosen as green, you see these important trends. So on the other side, you see some of my points or point that I took from different sources. 70% of the new power generation capacity in the next 2 decades, or looking bit back, will come from renewable energy. Europe, it's clear solar and wind increased from 5 to 15% and is still increasing. US, another case with increase from 3 to 15%. And now, two interesting things is that the cost of electricity is now approaching what we can call the grid parity, and that means that in the past the green energy was supported by government. Like in a lot of countries, mainly in Europe, they did get a lot of subsidy to generate. So this is changing now, and I take as an example a solar project that I saw recently in US, and that's, you see, the project has an investment of 163 million for 214 megawatt power. So that's bring this price for kilowatt. And the interesting point is that this is almost the same price per kilowatt that you will get it out of an H-class combined cycle power plant. So you see, this is this parity grid, which means that we are now producing solar energy at a similar price in investment. Then we can discuss maintenance costs, but at investment level already reach this parity. I'm coming close to the end, and now I will move to a different kind of topic. You heard data is important. You heard that Emea is important because it's consolidating. You heard that the market has changed quite heavily. But okay, now you will start somehow a training course and you would like to be an experienced underwriting, and it's not easy. So a certain number of criteria are important, and I would like to mention some of them. First is what I put under this very simple slide, which is a kind of monocultural industry. And you see in blue you got kind of the engineer, the symbol of techniques. You see, that's the way we look at things. And then in the value chain, you got different elements coming. You got the legal element, which is coming. You got the accounting element, which is coming. And you got the financial element, which is coming. You may perceive that in my presentation before, I was talking about investment return and how these investment returns are important. So it's because I want that we move from this situation where we got a lot of very strong technical knowledge, but insufficient legal knowledge, insufficient financial knowledge. And that's why I put in my presentation this important factor of the interest rate, because this is actually the financial aspect. So basically, I think that we need to move in the future regarding more integrated analysis of the risk, integrating, of course, mainly and predominantly technical factors, but don't forget also to include other factors. It's extremely important. And engineers, probably most of the people now listening are engineers, are very brilliant people, but we're not alone in the world. And we've got also very brilliant people on the legal aspect or on financial aspect. So be aware that integrating more of this should be part of the future of underwriting. That's a slide that shows the different economic waves. That's Keynes kind of approach, and show that there is cycle in the insurance, but also in the economy. And definitely now with the COVID, we are in one of those phases. In the past, to compensate with these low investment phases or difficult economic situation, there was so-called contracyclical investment with monetary policy that just created a cycle to compensate. So when the economy was going down, the states were putting more money. And we got a bit of this situation now, but depending on the country. But the intention of this is kind of to have a constant aggregate demand. And when the economy, private economy is going down, the state economy tried to put more investment in infrastructure. Not all the countries can invest nowadays, but that's the notion that try to balance. So depending on where we are in the cycle, we may have more infrastructure project and less investment, private investment, or vice versa. But I think that, to tell the truth, this is a concept which may not be so real. It's a bit more theoretical. So basically, that's, I don't know if it's animated on your screen, and that's the way for me to ask the question. Are you still on, everybody? No question?
It's animated. I can see it. All the wheels are turning.
Okay, and the time is turning too, so I'm getting close. So
you've got 1 minute theoretically, Oscar.
Okay, so I hurry up. That's where we need to combine technological approach, economical, legal, and the like that I mentioned before. Okay, I try to move this one, I skip. Visible and invisible risk. That's also important. As underwriter, you normally tend to see only this part of the risk, because that's the information we got, but a lot of things stay beyond. The contingent BI interruption is extremely important, add up, terrorism, NatCats, man-made disaster, strike road, civil commotion, all of these are important and needs to be looked at. The value chain is another factor that impact the risk. You got a client, a broker, insurance, reinsurance broker, reinsurance, retro. So a lot of people that are involved, and all want to have a share of our profits. And depending on how you manage this value chain at the end, and depending on where you are, you start to get less profit. So think about it and consider this in your underwriting, in your portfolio steering, so that you still have some money left out of this chain. Knowledge, yesterday, well, a lot of drawing, a lot of data that we receive. Today, I think that we have to go outside the box and look for data coming not only from the source of the business, but look at the Wikipedia, look at the Google, at a lot of sites that give you information. And you see Emea is an important one that can give you also extra information on how you conduct your underwriting. So you see, in order to conduct underwriting, you need good cooperation, and you need the good cooperation externally with your partners, but also internally in your company, with your financial department, with your actuarial department, with your claims department. So don't misunderstand, don't misestimate the importance of having a good cooperation skills in your DNA when you want to perform your underwriting approach. Don't forget the ethic. There are good habits and bad habits on the way. Consider that the bad habits can give you a bad turn. So think about this in your decision. Soft skills, yeah, you need to have soft skills in the life. The whole technical part will be dealt in the academy, in the full week of academy. But don't estimate the importance of having soft skills in conducting a proper engineering underwriting approach. And finally, I would like to say you need to have fun in what you do. If you don't have fun, if you don't like what you do, change and do something else, but have fun is also important. So last recommendation, underwriting, well, yeah, if you look only at the premium, that's quite a tricky one, because only in the premium can be very, very dangerous. So keep this into mind. And finally, I would say that I wish you a fantastic journey in your challenging job. And I hope that Emea can help you and be a kind of compass for you in your underwriting activity. I'm finished with the presentation. I think that I was with 1 minute of the time, which is
well done, Oscar. That was very good. As I said at the beginning, this is the first time we've ever tried this, so we would be interesting to know what your reaction is. That was an overall presentation, very high level, both the economic context, but also the statistical context that we as insurers have, and an overall view of the insurance market. And as you can see, towards the end of Oscar's presentation, he was starting to think about you as individual underwriters, and that would normally lead on to other more nuts and bolts type presentations about operational covers, project insurances, reinsurance, ALOP, DSU, and all those things. And unfortunately, we can't do it. So the question is, well, hopefully we'll be able to do a lot more of this in spring next year. We wanted to ask you, just to see if our polling system works, whether you would attend a hybrid conference, even if some of the presentations would come through the webinar. Would you still want to attend that conference? So Stephanie, can you launch that poll for us?
I can. I've just noticed a question sent a little while ago.
About cyber.
Yes.
Yes, I think we should answer that question. Let's leave it in abeyance. It's a tricky question, and I think we should. We'll answer it when it comes to the academy. The question was whether we should give cyber free. I don't think we should.
I will release the poll.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Can everyone see the polls? Yeah.
Feel free to answer.
If you can work out how to do it.
%50 have voted so far.
Yeah.
I cannot vote, but I'm.
No, you can't vote, Oscar. You're not allowed.
But I'm definitely supporting the approach.
Okay, we're up to 70% voting. We'll give it 10 more seconds. Okay, would you like the results, Mike?
Yes, please.
I'll close that. Oops. And share.
Okay, well done. Okay, that's brilliant. So that helps us confirm that we'll definitely try and go for the academy. Tell everyone and all your friends that the academy is going to try and go ahead still, and try and encourage as many people in your that you know to come, because we need to increase, I think, the number of underwriters specifically from the Asia region. I'm convinced most of the Asian delegates will be able to attend. Some of the European speakers might have to present via a webinar, but if we can all get as many of us in a room together, we can make it as interactive as possible and get some questions. I think Oscar's presentation, what we can do in when we come back is take a lot of Oscar's points and make them into discussion points and see whether everyone agrees with Oscar. Sometimes quite controversial ideas, but always exciting ones. So thank you very much, Oscar, for your presentation. Thank you very much for everyone for attending this presentation. And if you want more presentations before the spring conference, send me an email at mss.sec@emea.com and we'll see what we can organize. Thank you very much. And thank you,
Thank
Oscar.
you very much to everybody for the attention.
Bye,
and have a nice
yeah.
journey. And,
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Oscar.
Thanks.
all the best. Bye.
All the best.